ladies and gentlemen.
You are now tuned in to Mastering Mitzvahs. Mastering Mitzvahs. A podcast focused on creating the perfect bar and bat mitzvah celebration, offering tips, tricks, and trends to ensure an amazing event. Mastering Mitzvahs. From New Jersey's own Explosive Entertainment. Explosive Entertainment.
I know you're gonna dig this.
And here they are, your hosts, Dylan Weissman and Mike Langzer.
Yo. Close the refrigerator over here. I'm getting my coffee and whatever's ready to go, man. Hey, happy November.
Yeah, almost over. It's like mid-November. It's crazy.
Well, we haven't been on here since the end of
Thanksgiving's around the corner.
We decided that we're doing a full Thanksgiving here at my house. So I am just thrilled about that.
I bet you are.
No, my wife likes to cook. I could care less, you know.
I'm going to be in Jamaica, and I think that's going to be the best Thanksgiving ever.
I can hear that. So today is pretty cool, man. Episode 144, and it's labeled dessert, like just total dessert. And what got me thinking about this is dessert is a necessary part of a celebration. No great one goes without it in some capacity. And it is really like a quintessential moment in the latter half of your celebration where, with done correctly, can propel you to, amazing heights in terms of energy and excitement and memory making, or if done without tact or without message or without reasoning, it could drive your event into the ground. And we've had a couple of these dessert situations go through the last few weeks, month or so this season. And I wanted to kind of throw a couple at you. So the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about is dessert timing. A lot of people don't think about how the timing of dessert can affect a celebration, but you being a banquet manager for so many years, a catering manager for so many years, and seeing all of these events, I'm sure that you have stories and experiences about dessert timing and why it's important.
Yeah, you're like hitting all my pain points, like as you're saying this. So to me, the rule of thumb is always an hour before the end of the party. And it needs to be the real end of the party. Even this past weekend, there was a lot of debate on one of my events because there was a shuttle bus. This was a wedding, not a mitzvah, but there was a shuttle that was doing a pickup at 10:30 and another pickup at 11:30. So when do you do dessert? If it was an hour before the 10:30 pickup, that meant those guests that were staying to the very end would have cake and coffee, and then 2 hours before the end of the party. That makes it so hard for an entertainer. And it truly, it's not about us, but it's about the flow and it's about the vibe. And subliminally, you have cake and coffee and it's time to leave. So in the past weekend situation, I convinced them to do dessert as close to that first shuttle pickup as possible, not to be rude to the first shuttle people, but to stick with that hour timeline. And the other thing that happens with dessert is so often people have the cake and coffee. Now it's time to go over to the guests and say, we had so much fun. We love you. We're going to hit the road. Well, if you start that like processional of goodbyes, you're now taken off of your own dance floor, whether it's a wedding, a mitzvah, Sweet 16, doesn't matter. So my rule of thumb is always 1 hour before the end, and the end should be a true end. I'm going to go off on one more tangent, Dylan, because you hit my buttons here. But so often, well, not so often, once in a while, we've been hearing at mitzvahs lately in the planning phase, my party's going to end at 11:30. The kids are getting picked up at 11:30, but I think you should play like an extra hour for the adults or something like that. And boy, that sounds good in theory, but the reality is a party should end on a high note in its best state possible with all guests on the dance floor. So the answer is dessert an hour before the end, and the end should be the end, not a soft closing, not multiple closings. The end is the end, period.
Yeah, and it's important to realize that when dessert happens, if it happens too early, like you mentioned, I want to make sure that it's just really clear. When dessert happens, it basically gives this signal to the majority of your guests that the ending is near. And if done too early, you will cut yourself short for at least a small portion of it, if not a larger portion. Think about your older adults, your distant cousins, the ones who have longer drives. They see dessert and it's time to start packing it in. So for that reason, the timing is so incredibly important. Now, doing it too late and people will just leave without it. And you don't want that either. You are investing time and energy, and most importantly, your finances into having a great, well-rounded celebration. Well, you're in part paying for the time that you're there and in part paying for that dessert. You want both of them working in your favor.
Dylan, I'm going to also say we got to be cautious because sometimes people have like multiple desserts, not like as in there's an ice cream sundae bar, there's cake, and there's cotton candy, but like sometimes there's the dessert unveiling, but then there's going to be a sweet station as well, and maybe there's a parade of desserts that come out. And I really insist that it should all be the exact same time, unless it's a to-go item, which is only presented for the last 10-15 minutes of the night.
Right.
But if you think about, hi, we're going to have the ice cream sundae bar open at 11:30, and the cake is going to be served at 11, and at 11:45, this other thing is going to happen. Well, you've just kind of derailed that whole last hour of celebration for the confusion of dessert.
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually had a couple weeks ago a two-phase dessert, and there was no option about it. It was a bunch of like cookies and pastry items came out first, and then a half hour later, ice cream and cake was served. And I don't know why it happened. I don't know how it happened, but I turn around and ice cream and cake came out on the hour prior to the celebration concluding, but 30 minutes prior, cookies and like pastry started coming out, and it confused the guests. It really did. It made it seem like, all right, well, this is it. And we don't want it to feel that way. We want you to be celebrating the whole time through. Another big part of dessert is location. I want to throw 2 or 3 different ideas at you, and we're going to talk about all of them. The first one is dessert in a different room. The second one is dessert presented on the dance floor. And the third one is a like dessert buffet stations, butlered past, like that orientation. Okay. So there are some venues who do an incredible dessert display, like a Viennese hour that is, and I only recently found out that Viennese hours are very central to us. I mean, I was talking to entertainment companies in Florida, and they have never heard of that before. But some venues do an entire room, wall to wall, of just cakes and pastries and high-end items and a coffee liqueur station. And it's just a big deal, but it's in a separate room. What do you feel about that?
I embrace it, but I'd rather not. Like, my personal favorite is when the dessert is served on the dance floor in the same room, so it doesn't take people away. Because I was talking before about that, like, processional of goodbyes. If you get cornered in another space, that's challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Viennese hour, the dessert room has a really cool grand reveal, but there's got to be something that brings you back to the center of the floor. And I don't know what that is in your case, but just know that if you move some big feature like that away from your dance floor, people will leave your dance floor, and that's okay. It's the same rule of thumb with bars. If your bar is in a different room, your guests will spend a lot of time going either in and out of the room or out away from the room where your party is really located, and that's important to know. All right, the other one. Yeah,
hey,
go ahead.
Dylan, I'm just going to answer that though. Also, we talk so often, should a party be 4 hours or 5 hours or somewhere in between? This what dessert looks like and feels like is part of the factor of how you answer that question. Because if you are talking about dessert in a different room with this massive Viennese, then I think that does take, honestly, about 30 minutes of time. So
Yeah.
factor that into your timeline. A 4-hour party, especially with a lot of formalities and this huge dessert, doesn't work. But a 4-hour party with like butler desserts on the dance floor works beautifully.
Well, let's talk about that. So There are two different ideas when it comes to dessert served on the dance floor. There are a couple of really great venues that we work with all the time that literally wheel out carts of cakes and like little desserts and an ice cream bar like onto the dance floor. My brother's wedding had a flambe that came right to the dance floor. What are your thoughts on that?
Love it. I love when they make the dessert into the show. It's, you know, it's part of the show and it's part of the wow factor, and it's a memorable thing. And you've said flambe. I'm going to give a shout out to our friends at Classical Caterers, B'nai Tikva. You know, they do an incredible flambe, and when they bring their parade of desserts out onto the dance floor, it is like awe-inspiring. Like everybody stops. They actually ask us to play a certain song, and
Right. That's where I was getting at.
the parade, it all is timed, and it I think it's very memorable. And another shout out to Orem, you know, in Freehold, does another. They don't necessarily do a big flambe, but they just do this parade of these giant carts that are, you know, impressive looking, and yeah, everybody stops because they want to see it. But dessert in these cases is fairly fast. Like does not need to be out for a full hour.
You know, Palms Plaza does it a great job too. I was there this
Absolutely.
weekend and they did a great job with theirs. And you know what's so funny? They brought it right to the dance floor, which brought people back to the dance floor. They got their dessert, whatever it was going to be, that slice of cake they were going to eat. And I found them dancing on the dance floor, eating their dessert right then and there, while they're looking at all the other desserts. It's like it's this gravitational pull. So in a separate room, the gravity is going to move you to that room. If you want the dessert on the dance floor, you're going to have that gravity move you to the dance floor. And I think that's really powerful. And look, there's the obvious ones like dessert stations that are around the room. Those venues that do dessert on the dance floor, they don't stay on the dance floor very long. But let's make that very clear. They end up moving those carts or those display items into more stationary items off the dance floor after the big presentation. But then it becomes more of like a traditional dessert that we've seen, where either it's plated to the table or they have an ice cream sundae bar or something like that. So I really love when venues hit it hard like that, and then obviously get out of the way to allow the rest of the celebration to kind of snowball from that dessert. It could be a big primer.
Yeah, I'm just going to hit this point home. If dessert can be a show, I think you need to incorporate it. I think it's so impressive. It's so fun. I'm
Now-
big fan of that.
Now, here is the real fast caveat. They need to be able to do it fast. All right. Made to order crepe stations for dessert that I've seen often take a very long time, and you could have a line built up. So just be mindful about some of those things. Even ice cream sundae bars can have a backup because it's every single topping on the planet. You know, things like that matter. So let's be mindful of that. And that could be a part of the determining factor about when you serve dessert and how long the party is.
So let's talk about music at this point. You know, you and I don't work together too often, so we may have a little bit differing views here. But music, I never know in advance what I'm going to play during dessert until I see and feel it. You know, sometimes the music continues as is, like the dance. They're literally dancing through dessert. They got, you know, cannoli in their hand and they're dancing and they're still celebrating. Sometimes the vibe changes, but the music never stops, in my opinion, and certainly shouldn't be like elevator music. But sometimes this is a good time to switch into like sing along kind of things, like nothing wrong with playing a Sweet Caroline type track during dessert, singing, you know, and still enjoying your pastries.
I think the big takeaway there is just you're not stopping your celebration for dessert. Dessert's going to happen in tandem with your celebration continuing. Whereas a lot of times, you know, meal service is a hard stop into something different. Like there is a dramatic change in some cases, but at least in the great experiences that we've had, if you can keep the celebration going right through dessert and let dessert be just a feature of it, I think that you're in really good shape. There's another part of dessert that I've seen very recently where it's butlered to the dance floor. Let me give you a couple examples. The ones that I love seeing are like the little ice cream sandwiches and the small one bite brownie type of situations. It's kind of like your cocktail hour, but all dessert foods. In sports themed ones, I've seen like the ice cream truck style ice creams that are prepackaged, like brought out on trays and butlered. But just last weekend, we did a celebration for a good friend of ours, Andrea Hecht, and the bat mitzvah girl, Sienna, wheeled out on a tricycle giving out candy bars right to the dance floor. It was a big part of it. So there is a lot of power behind the desserts coming to you as opposed to you going to the desserts. So that means that if you're on the dance floor and the dessert's coming to you, there's no reason to leave it. And if they're one bite and short and easy to eat, then you're in good shape.
What you just described without saying it was dessert can impact the energy of your party depending on how it's presented.
Yeah.
I think here's our takeaway and here's our recap of this whole conversation. If dessert means slowly walk into another room, there may not be music playing in that other room. Envision what that energy feels like. It's a downturn to your party. But if dessert is paraded in with a techno type song and, sparklers and, bicycle, bringing it in, that is an upturn to your energy of your party.
Yeah.
And how the last hour of your party is remembered may be the most impactful.
We say it all the time in our pre-shift meetings, but I often go to our staff right around the time that dessert happens when I'm leading the team, and I say, hey, it's do or die time now. What we do in the next 20 minutes through dessert will impact the rest of our celebration together. So let's make sure that we're hitting with energy, we're doing the right stuff, we're making dessert a part of our celebration. And I often say as an MC, like, hey, don't be afraid, bring your cake to the dance floor, let's keep this thing going type of vibe. So I think that when you're thinking about dessert, it shouldn't be an afterthought and it shouldn't be a non-thought. You should be considering what's happening during this moment.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, I don't know that I have too much more to say on this, but do dessert, do it well, enjoy it, but don't let it derail your party.
I'm with it. So that's episode 144, Mastering Mitzvahs, all about dessert. Sweet. That's Mike. I'm Dylan, and check out all things explosive at XE events, and we'll see you next time.